Hi, welcome back to our lecture series. We are on chapter 11 of the textbook that starts on page 212. All right, we're going to be looking at now note-to-note counterpoint in 18th century style. Now we've been using species counterpoint first, second, third, fourth, and fifth, but now we're going to take it a little step farther. And don't let this chapter overwhelm you with all of the writing and all of the concepts. There's basically just a few simple concepts that are really you need to know. And that's what I'm going to try and do in this chapter with this lecture. Okay, first of all, go to page 214. Contrapuntal motion. It says, some conventions of 18th century counterpoint directly follow those of species counterpoint. Okay, we know that. We're going to note-to-note counterpoint from St. George's Windsor. This piece we're going to consider, although the durations are varied, each bass note corresponds to a single soprano note in the same rhythm. As in first species counterpoint, the intervals are a mix of perfect and imperfect consonances, and the voices employ mostly contrary motion. Some things that are different are immediate repetition of notes in measures 1 and measure 3. You can see that. The A and the F in measure 1 are repeated. In measure 3, same thing, they're repeated. And they're marked with an R for repetition. We also have repetition across the bar line in measures 2 and 3. Measure 2 and measure 3, there's another A and F. And resulting from repeated notes in the existing hymn melody. Okay, no problem. Now hymns use oblique motion more often than strict style does to accommodate repeated notes in the melody or bass. And if you look at example 11.2, you're going to see repeated notes in measure 1, the F and the soprano clef, measure 2, the C and the bass clef, and also in measure 5, measure 4, measure 3, all the measures, they've got some repetition there. And they want you to mark oblique motion, contrary, etc. I think you're pretty good with that. If you want to do that, feel free to go ahead. Key concept here, in tonal music, a unit of musical thought, okay, musical thought, that ends with a point of closure or repose, that's a close, is called a phrase. Okay, so we remember that term phrase. So in example 11.2, we could say this is a big phrase here. The combination of melodic, okay, the melody moving up or down, the harmonic, the two notes together, and the rhythmic element, the rhythm, that create a sense of closure at the end of a phrase is called a cadence. Okay, so example 11.2, the end there, the very last measure, the very end of measure 6 into the beginning, the very end of measure 5 into the beginning of measure 6, that's a cadence. Okay, we have in the soprano line, we have an E, which is scale degree 7, because we're in the key, scale degree 7, yeah, we're in the key of F major. 7, which is leading tone, T, 7 resolves to tonic, to 1, scale degree 1. So in the soprano line, 7 resolves up to 1, and we have, in the bass line, we have the dominant, which is C, resolves up to the tonic. So in the bass line, we have dominant, tonic. In the soprano line, we have T, do. Okay, leading tone to tonic. Remember that for later on. All right, so that's a cadence. Okay, it's an ending there. And on the top of page 215, the bass 5 to 1, scale degrees 5 to 1, imply harmonic motion from root position dominant chord. Okay, the dominant chord is in root position, so the root of the dominant is C, it's going to be in the bass, to 1, which is also root position. So if you were to put Roman numerals under this cadence here in example 11.2, it would be 5 to 1, both in root position. When combined with either of the typical closing gestures from strict species, which is 2 to 1 or 7 to 1, we have 7 to 1 here, in the soprano, this motion represents the strongest type of tonal cadence. Right? The strongest cadence, or the strongest ending you can have, is when you have, in the bass line, dominant to tonic in root position, and in the soprano, 7 to 1. Okay? Or 2 to 1. In the blanks below, try number 1 for 215. In the blanks below, example 11.2, label the motion between each pair of harmonic intervals as contrary, oblique, parallel, similar, or repetition. If you want to do that, feel free to do that. You can pause the video if you want. Okay. right, so if we continue on page 215 here and look at example 11.3, we have letter A, we have a cadence here at the end of this exercise, or this segment here. Now the cadence is going to be the last two pitches. It's in measure 2, it's the last half of the beat, the second half of the, last half of the measure, the second half there, and it goes into the first beat of the next measure, which is measure 3. If you notice we're in the key of G major, we have F sharp, but begins in G, we're in the key of G major. So our tonic is going to be G, which is scale degree 1. Notice the soprano line, it ends A to B. A in the key of G is scale degree 2. B is scale degree 3. So in the soprano line, we have a 2-3 resolution. Not that strong. A 2-to-1 or 7-to-1 would be the strongest. So let's look at the bass line of this as cadence. And we see it goes D down to G, scale degree 5 to scale degree 1. So dominant to tonic. That's a strong progression in the bass line. So even though the bass line is strong, the soprano line is not as strong. So this isn't the strongest type of cadence you could have. If you kept the 5-to-1 bass line, 5th scale degree to the 1st scale degree, and changed the soprano to either 2-to-1 or 7-to-1, then that'd be the strongest cadence or ending you can have. If you notice in letter B, they have something called a voice exchange in measure 7. The B on the second beat in the soprano line, it comes back again in the bass line on the 4th beat. There's a B. And there's a line connecting the two to show it's a voice. It's called a voice exchange. In the second beat of the bass line, we have a G, and then in the soprano line, it comes back in measure beat 4, a voice exchange. So to summarize what we've just done, on page 216 at the top, you can read that summary. Basically, you're now going to have more oblique motion and interval repetitions because of the style we're writing in. And you also have new cadence arrivals as compared to the species counterpoints you were doing. You now have stronger harmonic motion. You can have 7-to-1 or 2-to-1, and then 5-to-1 in the bass. Okay, you didn't do that before in the species counterpoint, but now in the bass line you can have 5-to-1 dominant to tonic.